Hello everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. Today I'm going to be using Simon Says Stamp's brand new December 2023 card kit called Making Spirits Bright. I'm really enjoying this kit because it's filled with a lot of festive elements that you can use to make holiday cards. And so I'm going to share 3 ideas that I created with the kit contents. And we're going to start off with this snowflake card. This card, I thought it'd be fun to use some of the frames, the pattern paper, and create a little bit of a window into some of the other papers. The Christmas layer frames from Holtz, you get a whole pack of them in the kit. These are great for making all sorts of things, including frames, shaker cards, and more. I'm going to put some acetate behind one of my frames, and I've already cut a piece down from our Simon Says Stamp lightweight acetate. This is about 3 by 3, which is about the same size as the frame that I'm going to be using for this card. I picked out one of the snowflake stamps from the Making Spirits Bright stamp set, and I'm going to line this up inside of my Misty stamping tool in generally the left corner of the acetate, so that way it's peeking out from the left of the frame. To stamp my image, I'm going to use Simon Says Stamp embossing ink, and I did prep the surface with a Simon Says Stamp powder tool that I can sprinkle embossing powder on top of. And for that, I'm using antique gold. It's my favorite gold for the holidays. It has such a beautiful warm tone. And I'm going to use my heat tool to carefully set this. As you can see, I'm going back and forth from the front side to the back side to get a nice clean embossing. This acetate is a little thinner, so I didn't want to warp it, and that's why I went back and forth to the front and back to get a nice clean embossing. So on the back side of my frame, I'm going to put some redline tape. Redline tape is super strong, and I wanted something that was going to adhere to the acetate really well. So I used that to attach the frame to the acetate. And now I'm going to pick out a section of this sheet of pattern paper that I want to use as the backdrop for this snowflake. So I love that this has a music print to it, and I thought it'd be fun to add a little bit more color. So using some Simon Says Stamp Tide Pool ink, I'm going to just ink blend in that bottom left corner where the snowflake is going to be to get that nice little touch of blue. And then I also used Wonderland Mica Stain from Holtz. This one's not in the kit, but it's a great add-on if you're purchasing the kit and you don't have this. I love using Mica Stain for holiday cards, and the Wonderland was the perfect color to pair with these pieces. So I splattered that onto the music sheet background paper, and then I'm going to attach my frame on top of that. And I used foam tapes so that way the frame has a little bit of lift off of that background to give it some depth. For the pattern paper that I'm going to layer behind all of this, I'm going to distress it. And this is such a handy little tool from Holtz. This is the paper distresser, and it's just a little blade that's inside of the circular shaped tool, and you just run it along the edge of your paper. And yeah, you could do that with some scissors, but it's a lot easier with this tool. And so I'm just going to distress the edges, and I did tear a couple pieces so that way I have a worn look on this sheet of paper. And that's going to frame up the main element here, the frame, beautifully. So I'm going to adhere my pattern paper onto my 4 1/4 square card base here with some of the glue stick that's included in the kit. And I love glue sticks for adhering pattern paper and ephemera because it gives me a little bit of wiggle time before I have to fully commit to the location. So I adhered both the pattern paper and also my frame piece with that adhesive. In the kit, you get an entire book of Holtz Christmas stickers, and there are great greetings on some of these sheets in both red and green. So I've picked out a green sentiment, and I'm going to attach it onto some cardstock and then trim it down. The reason is because I want to attach this with some dimension. So I'm going to put this along the right-hand side of my frame, and I put a piece of foam tape back there so that way it has some lift. There are also these beautiful half pearl stickers that are included in the kit, and I used those to accent the corner of my frame. So that's card number 1. It is super cute. I love that snowflake sitting on top of the music notes, and that beautiful distressing around the edges really gives it a beautiful vintage feel. Speaking of vintage, doesn't this pattern paper from Simple Stories just give you all of the classic Christmas feels? I love this little sheet that I cut down from the paper pack that has this beautiful Santa image on it. And I'm going to frame that up with one of the Holtz Christmas layers frames. I'm going to put foam tape behind that frame, And this is going to give it some dimension off of that beautiful image. I am going to turn that image though into a shaker. I thought it'd be fun to fill the shaker with mica flakes, just to give it a snowy effect. So I'm going to take some clear plastic. This happens to be from a clear bag that Simon Says Stamps sells, and I have them linked below in the video description along with all the other products that I'm using today. I cut that clear bag down to be a tad larger than this panel, and I'm putting some double-sided tape on the back side of this piece. Then I'm going to lay that into the plastic and remove the release paper from 3 sides of this panel. That's going to allow me to then fold that plastic into the adhesive so we can start forming a pocket that the mica flakes can be poured into. So this plastic is super easy to fold. It folds nicely and cleanly around the edges of your paper. And if you have any excess that's hanging on the corners, you can just take your scissors to trim those up. So now I have my pocket formed, and all I need to do now is pour some mica flakes inside. This is the perfect effect for snow. It's low bulk, so this is not going to be a super bulky card, and especially if you did not use any foam tape, it would really be an easy card to mail. So I closed up that last edge of the plastic to form the enclosure for my mica flakes, and then I adhered that piece and also my frame onto some pattern paper that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so a full A2 size card. And so now we have this super cute snowy shaker that was made possible by those fun mica flakes. All right, so now we're gonna work on a sentiment. There was a sentiment on that Santa sheet, but I wanted to use one of the greetings from the stamp set. So I'm going to prep the surface of my Schoolhouse Red cardstock that's from the kit with a powder tool from Simon Says Stamp. I'll use embossing ink to ink up my image, and then I'm going to stamp this down. And this is going to give me a place now that I can pour my embossing powder, which in this case I'm going to use cream. I love using the Simon Says Stamp cream embossing powder for something that I don't want bright white. So it gives that perfect bright cream on top of your dark colored cardstocks, and it just looks beautiful. And it goes really well with more vintage styled imagery and colors like I'm using here. And so I put that sentiment right over top of the greeting that already existed. And now I have this beautiful snowy shaker that just has the perfect vintage feel. All right, so I do have one more card to share, and this one uses the embossing folder. This ornament embossing folder is stunning. I'm going to emboss it onto some Simon Says Stamp 120-pound white cardstock. Just run it through your die cut machine inside the embossing folder so we get that beautiful texture. On the back side of the paper, so the area that's not raised, I'm going to start swiping ink pads. These are Distress Oxide ink pads, and you did see the colors that I'm using here. I ended up not using aged mahogany. I just used festive berries and worn lipstick. I'm swiping these ink pads across the paper, and because we're using the back side where everything is recessed, we're getting this amazing background. And yes, some of the ink is getting on some of the recessed areas, but it's creating this beautiful letterpress effect. And I love how the oxide inks give such a rich color tone because they are partially pigment, so they have that beautiful intense color. This almost reminds me of a peppermint stripe. I think it's super fun. I also decided to embellish it with some splatter. I'm using some shimmer mist from Brutus Monroe, so this is just a plain old shimmer mist. And then I also used some of Tim Holtz's Distress Mica Stain in Yuletide. And anytime you use a mica stain, you do want to make sure you shake it up really good to get that mica distributed through the liquid. And that's going to give you the perfect shimmer when you tap this onto your project. So while that dries, I'm going to work on my sentiment. For the sentiment, I'm going to use one of the single line greetings from the stamp set. I'm going to prep the surface of this black cardstock with my powder tool, and I'll again use my embossing ink to ink up the sentiment. For this greeting, I am going to use that same cream embossing powder we used a little bit ago. That's going to look really pretty on top of this black cardstock. And I'll just use my heat tool to set this, and then I'll use my paper trimmer to just trim this down into a small little strip. I'll put that right in the middle of my card in between the ornaments, and I'm going to leave it just like that because this card is so pretty with those colors and the ornaments and the embossing. I didn't want to add anything else that was going to distract from it. So clean and simple was the way to go here. Well, I hope you enjoyed all these cards that I've shared today using Simon Says Stamp's December 2023 card kit called Making Spirits Bright. If you'd like to find out more information about the kit, you can find links below in the video description or over on my blog. I have links below if you're watching this on YouTube, and there are links at the bottom of my blog post if you're watching this on my blog. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I can't wait to come back to share more with you all. But until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.